Hi guys, and welcome back to another video here. This is our very first live stream, so if you do have any Excel questions, I'll be happy to answer them for you. Leading zeros. Okay, so to add a leading zero, there are a few different ways you can go about doing this. So let's just head over to the desktop. Okay, so if you've got a bunch of numbers like this here and you try to actually put a zero at the beginning, you'll notice how Excel basically just drops this out every single time. So the quickest fix for this is to actually put an apostrophe before the zero, and that will basically fix in the zero there just before the actual series of numbers that you're looking for. However, this then basically treats the particular number string here as text rather than as a number. So the best and more preferred method would actually be to go into the home tab of the ribbon here and head over to the number formatting section. If we just pop this out into its own dialog box, what we can do is actually head over to custom here, where we have the ability to basically add in various different basically like customized formatting for a specific cell. Now the hashtag is the symbol that represents number inside Excel. So what we want to do is actually in quotations add a zero just before a hashtag like this, and then we can go and add all of our numbers into our Excel document, and this will now allow us to have a leading zero at the beginning of all of our numbers. So if we were to have 5, 6, 7 here, go into our formatting, go to custom formatting, just under any of these, and in double quotations just put a 0 in the middle of that, and then a hashtag afterwards, and then just click OK, and that will always add a leading zero into your number formatting. Now obviously this could be used to fix down a specific number of digits as well. So if, for example, we wanted to include 10 digits, then actually we can come into our custom formatting, and then in here actually just add basically a couple of hashtags here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then click OK. Now when I go and type 1, 2, 3, sorry, it should have been zeros, not hashtags. So if we actually put a series of zeros here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 zeros, and then a hashtag afterwards, now it will add all of those zeros at the beginning of our number, and obviously this will still be treated as a number and not as text. So hopefully that answered your question. If it did, please do put a like. drop-down menus? Is that what you're after? Okay, for drop-down menus, it's pretty easy and straightforward. So let's assume that we have a series of names. So we'll go for something like this, and Helen such as this, right? And what we'd like to do is actually create a menu where you can select one of these names from that specific drop-down menu. So what you do is just find a location where you would actually like to have your drop-down menu. So we'll just choose this particular location just here. And what we're going to do is navigate over to the Data tab on the ribbon here. Once inside the Data tab, we head over to Data Verification and choose the drop-down menu. We want to go and actually click into Data Verification. From here, you'll have this dialog box. And what you want to do is under the settings section where it says allow, change this to a list. Okay, and then you'll have this new box appear called source. What we want to do is just click inside the source box and then select the order of the names or the list of data that you'd like to appear inside your drop-down menu. With that highlighted, you'll notice it will appear inside our source, and then we can click OK. This will now automatically, when you select this particular cell, have a little drop-down menu appear here. From here, if we just toggle that, we can see the names that we had selected for use within inside this drop-down menu. And what we can do is select one of these, and it will automatically populate the value into that specific cell. This is incredibly useful if you want to basically be using drop-down menus to be a part of another formula or function. So you can start to build quite complex data sheets up using drop-down menus like this one here. Hopefully that helped answer your question with drop-down menus, Helen. If it did, please do leave a like on the video and the live stream. And yeah, if there's anything more specific you would like to know about drop-down menus, let me know. But otherwise, that's the most basic way to basically set up a drop-down menu in Excel. Graphs, yep, that's fine. We'll okay, let me just delete out what we've currently been working on. And let's have a look. Okay, so let me just clear this data verification from here. Easy menu, right. Okay, so first thing we're going to need to do in order to basically create a graph in Excel is to first of all have some data. So let's just create a salesperson here, the month in which they had some sales and then some sales. And let's just go for those standard names we were using earlier. We'll go with Adam, and then Helen. Okay, so now let's assume this is January, and we're just going to copy that down here, and then let's go with some 350, 235, 140, and let's say 500 there. Okay, so now let us copy this out. So that's February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December. And what we'll do is just copy this down. And hopefully if this will work. No, okay, that's annoying. Let's just quickly fire these out. Okay, and what I'm going to do is just repeat these down, make it nice and quick. Right, so now we have a set of information here that we'd like to actually put into a graph. The first thing that we're going to want to do is understand what our graph should look like. So we can't just throw this information directly into a graph because it would be just too much information for Excel to render. So first of all, we have to summarize this information into a meaningful way. So let's assume we want to know what the sales were for every single month, and we want to basically put that into a graph. The first thing we're going to want to do is actually summarize the months into a little mini table. So if we go for month and sales, just like this here, and then we just basically put in all of the months that we had down to December. Now I noticed that from May it's actually spelt out properly, so we'll go June. Let's do that, right. Then what we want to do is actually use the SUMIFS function here. So we'll go equals SUMIFS, and we're going to summarize our sales, and the criteria is the month, and then we're going to sum it by this particular month here. If anyone wants to know a little bit more about the SUMIFS function, then yeah, let me know and we can basically go through that. Now every single month is exactly the same. This isn't an error in the calculation side, it's just that we adjusted or kept the same values in each of these. So I'm just going to now multiply by 1.1 to grow it by 10% every single time. I'll fire that down, and now we have some sales that are different for every single month. What I'll do is I'll just throw this into currency, and I'll probably just do the same here to keep things consistent. Okay, so now we have a set of sales data here by person, by month, by the sales they have actually achieved, and then we have summarized that information into a little chart here by month, and then the total sales that were achieved. Now I'll show you what happens when you try to put this into a chart. So if we go to the Insert tab, and then we go and try to put this into like a little bar chart like this, you end up with too much information trying to be rendered into one specific screen because we haven't told Excel that we need to limit the amount of data that it has. So we have every single month, every single salesperson basically, and then every sale that has been achieved. So it's just makes no sense to anybody. So what we need to do is actually use this little subset of data, go back to that Insert tab, go and click on the bar chart, and now we end up with something a bit more meaningful where we have all of those sales by month and progressively as we move through the year. Now this obviously required a couple of extra steps, right? So obviously we had to have the data itself, but then we had to go and summarize that data manually using the SUMIFS function. Now you can basically create a shortcut here. If I just click up here at the top, rather than creating a mini little summarization chart yourself, a little table here using something like SumIFS, what you could do is basically create what they call a pivot chart. So if we go back to the Insert tab and come over to this section, you'll see Pivot Chart just here. If we give that a click, it wants to select the table, which is basically this one here. Sorry, it's this one here. It's the actual summarized data, before you've summarized any data. So it's the raw data that we're just going to throw into that pivot chart there. It's the existing workbook, and we're going to put that in H1, and then we're going to click OK. Well, this is going to give you two things. This little floating box is actually a chart, and this one that you can't seem to select into or move around anywhere is a pivot table. But the pivot chart is what we're after. So what you do with the pivot chart selected, on the far right hand side, let me just get rid of my webcam there. On the far right hand side, you can see we have all of the information from our raw data, salesperson, month, and sales. What we can do is actually grab each one of these and put them into the corresponding boxes at the bottom. So if I grab the month, that should go into our axis as categories, and then we should grab the sales and we should put that into values. And now we've created that exact same chart, but obviously requiring a lot less steps. So this little mini summarization table that we created manually has been created for us automatically by the pivot chart. So all we need to do is, instead of actually creating this, just with this data selected, go to the Insert tab and click Pivot Chart, and then that'll let you create the actual charts and render them a lot more effectively. And this also lets you have drop-down menus directly in that chart, so you can select, okay, what were the first 3 months of the year, and it will only show you those first 3 months, and it adjusts that pivot table in the background. So this is a really powerful function that basically just helps you render charts very, very quickly in Excel. And obviously you still get all of the design functionality that you would normally have with regular charts, only difference being that it's actually a pivot chart where you can actually pivot the data directly inside that chart without actually having to basically do any kind of summarizations in between your raw data and your desired chart at the end. But that's it. If you found that useful, hopefully you did, just let me know in the chat, and yeah. Averages, yeah, there's several different average functions that you can use. Let's go through a few. Okay, so let's just get a series of numbers. Let's just call them sales. And let us just add some values in here. So let's start at 100 and just get these going up in 100 intervals. And let's just do that. Okay, so if you have a series of numbers like this here and you would like to actually average them, there's several different ways you can go about doing this. The first one is the easiest, equals average. So at the bottom here, if I just like to actually average this particular range, there's several different things you can do here, but if you go equals and start typing average, Excel will kind of start to show you the average functions that are available to you. The most widely used is just average, and if I just double click there, you can see that opens up the average function with a parentheses, and I can just select the entire range of cells that I would like to average and press return. That now shows me that the average of this particular range of values is 1,250. With that being said, on the Home tab of the ribbon, on the far right hand side, you have Auto Sum. And from here, if you actually click the drop-down menu, there is the ability to automatically average a range of values for you. So you can just click Average, it will automatically select every number that's adjacent to that formula, and then you press return and you get the same result. Now, with that being said, there's a couple of other average functions in Excel that you would like to use. So if we go back to the equals average, you'll notice that we have access to something called averageA, and if I give that a click and open that up as a parentheses there, this works in the same way. I can select the entire range of values and close the bracket and just press return. We get the same value. So you might think that this is actually working in exactly the same way, except averageA looks for more than just numbers within the selection that you have. So for example, if I take row 11 here where it says 1,000 and I delete that out, the average is recalculated, but it's recalculated on a different set of criteria than regular average. So if I just type equals average, open up a bracket and select the same series, and then close that down, you can see that there are basically two different sets of information here. So if I just actually type in some text here, like this, you get you basically get two different values, right? So if I just pull these over to here, we call this one averageA, and then we call this one just adjacent to it average. What are they doing? Well, average is looking for numbers in this particular range of values. Now, because we have added text into row 11, it has ignored row 11 altogether. So it's now showing you the average of this, right? And it ignores row 11. And we can check this by looking in the bottom right hand side, just down on our taskbar here where it says the average. And this is the average of those selected cells that I have highlighted as 1260.869565, which is exactly the same as the average that's being presented here. Now, averageA will not ignore this. Instead, it will be looking at everything in that range, but where it sees any text, it will basically treat it as a 0. And what that means for an average is it basically pulls down your average much lower than the regular average formula because it thinks that's a 0. So if I were to change that to a 0, we get averageA doesn't move, but average would move. Okay, if you can saw that, if I just return and go back a step, you can see that averageA is 1208, whereas average is 1260. And if I try to just zoom in so you can see that, if I, as I said before, change this text to being a 0, average becomes the same as averageA. So just so understand that depending on your circumstances or however your data is actually set up, will determine how you might like to actually have this set up inside of your document. So you might actually find that averageA works better for you than average, because sometimes there are text values inside the series of numbers that you're trying to actually generate an average from. Or if it's with the other examples that I've done in the past, where you might have a salesperson who hasn't started up until halfway through the year, but you want to actually calculate their true average over the year rather than just the numbers that they actually have achieved, then an average might be the way to go. Or if someone's had some time off sick and you wanted to average their correct average across a year minus the, say, that 2 months that they were off ill, then an averageA would be the better move to go for, because you're going to get a correct average over a period of time using averageA, treating text as a 0. An average would just be if you can 100% certain that there are only number values based inside that particular range of values. Now, those are just the two basic averages, and you can go a little bit further. You could have a look at averageIF and averageIFS. Okay, so these two functions basically now let you, if I just remove that and change that back to a 0, these will let you basically determine values between or do an average between two different values, or based on some other kind of criteria. So for example, if I were to change all of this to a series of names, right, just like this here, and I fire these down, we would like to know what the average was for Nick and the average was for William. Then we would use averageIFS. If, however, we wanted to know the average between 1,000 and 2,000, say, then we would just use averageIF. And these work out slightly differently. So if I go equals averageIF, and I can just double click this to open it up, we can see that it's asking for a range. So the range is going to be our column A here. And then it's looking for a criteria. So the criteria has to be inside quotations, and we're going to basically say it has to be greater than or equal to 1,000. We'll close those quotations, and then we can just close that off and press return. So the average value for anything greater than 1,000 is 1,700 in this particular scenario, and it's equal to or greater than 1,000. So if I did not include that equal sign there, it basically becomes 1,750 because it's greater than 1,000. It excludes the 1,000 in the scenario. So I'm just going to include 1,000 by using that equal sign. Now averageIF, if I go equals averageIFS, we have an average range to start with. So our average range is column A, and then our criteria range will be column B, and then our criteria, well, let's just call that in quotations Nick, and press return. I needed to actually add a comma just there. It's 1,200, so the average now for just Nick as a salesperson is 1,200, but we can change that easily to William, and William's is 1,300. Okay, so now you're able to basically dissect your sales data a little bit further, but you don't have to stop with just one criteria either. You could add a second criteria. We can say it's in column A, and the criteria is going to be greater than or equals to 1,000. Close those parentheses, double quotations and parentheses, press enter, and now for William, anything greater than or equal to 1,000 has an average of 1,700. And yeah, so basically when it comes to averages, you need to kind of understand what it is that you're trying to actually get out from it. And yeah, basically just start to set up your formulas so that they work correctly in the way that you intend them to. So personally, I don't tend to use averageIF. Even if I'm just using a single criteria, I tend to stick to averageIFS, because if I ever wanted to add another one, I can just add another criteria into it rather than having to start a whole new function. But yeah, I basically, if I just delete that column out, these are the three that I personally use a lot of, averageA, average, and averageIFS, depending on what kind of data you're dealing with and how you best want to actually, start to use it more effectively within your document. Hopefully that answered your questions. If it did, please leave a like. Yeah, hopefully that did answer any kind of average question that you did have. You might have to elaborate a little bit on format cells. Do you mean to use conditional formatting, or format the cells for specific kind of number functions, percent functions? What is it that you're looking for? Oh, okay, so you mean to actually create borders within Excel. Yeah, so let's just flick back over to the desktop. Okay, so in here, under the Home tab, you have highlight in certain cells, etc. for tables. Okay, so if it's for tables specifically, then actually the quickest and easiest way to actually go about this is to actually say, let's say I have this sales data. Let me just copy this over into a new sheet. And I want to put this into a table. The quickest and easiest way to take your data and format it into a table with borders and banded rows or banded columns is to actually head over to the Home tab just here, and then head over to the right hand side where it says Format as a Table. From this drop down menu, you get presented with all of these various different formats predefined by Excel that you can apply to your data. Personally, I prefer to stick to something like the black and white theme. With that selected, it will automatically try to detect your data, and because I was inside it when I tried to format it as a table, it has basically selected all of the data inside my raw information, and it's basically detected that I have headers. Now, if I don't have headers, I can untick that. But when it comes to Excel tables, it's important that you do have headers for every single column. And with all that done, you just do is click OK, and it will automatically assign the formatting to that particular table. With that done, it will also drop you into the contextual tab called Table Design. From here, you can see there's lots of other things that you can do to your styling of that particular table. You can obviously change the colors, so if you wanted it to be blue, orange, yellow, whatever. I tend to personally stick to black and white. But also, if you wanted to have, so say, non-banded rows or banded rows, you have that option there to just flick that on and off. You can have banded columns, which works better if you've got more than just 3 rows of data. Personally, the best way to go is with banded rows rather than banded columns, but under certain circumstances you might find that banded columns work for you. Or if you wanted just the header row, first row, last row, etc., you can basically mess around with these table designs as you see fit. But yeah, so other than that, you can do it manually without converting it as a table, but generally speaking, with Microsoft Excel, where it is in 2020, you want to be using more Excel tables than just putting borders around data. And that comes into play in a lot of other ways where Microsoft has things like Power BI or SharePoint, where you can start to actually interact with your tables outside of the actual Excel document itself. So always, where possible, try to convert your data into an Excel table and then apply the formatting to that once you actually have it enabled. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question in terms of formatting a table. Obviously you have this option just here for fonts, where you can obviously assign things like borders, fills, and various other kind of styles to specific cells. But I wouldn't really recommend doing this. I would probably recommend that you actually start using Excel tables. It's just a little bit easier to use. Hopefully that answered your question there. And if it did, yeah, just drop a like on the video. How to comment on cells. Yeah, that's not that difficult to do. Just trying to refresh my memory because there's a couple of new functions in Excel that yeah, let's jump on over to the desktop and have a look. Okay, so here we are just in Excel. Right, so the first thing you want to do is, when it comes to commenting on cells, is actually head over to the Review tab. And then from here you can add new comments, but yeah, it's notes that they've added that's new. So you can add a comment like you always have done in the past, but they've kind of changed the style of these. So let me just zoom in a little bit. So these new style comments, they're more like conversations now, where basically Microsoft is moving more towards having more collaborative working. So your Excel documents are supposed to be in SharePoint, ideally, in their opinion, where you don't send copies of emails across email anymore. Instead, you have them locally in your OneDrive for business, where everybody has access to those files and everybody edits those files at the same time. So instead, these comments that they're used to in old style Excel, where you just drop a comment onto a specific cell, was kind of locked into the person who put the comments in there in the first place. In 2020, Excel now basically has these conversation style comments where you put a comment into a cell just by going to the Review tab, add a comment, and then here you can start a conversation. So you can say, this is a test, right? Press send, and now you can see here that the comment is placed there. You can see who placed the comment and when it was placed or what specific time. And because I'm the person who posted this, I can edit that. But anyone else who sees this comment, which is identifiable by the pink icon in the cell, or if you click show comments, they'll show up here on the far right hand side, basically allows other users to reply to that comment, add and to that conversation of that particular comment in Excel. So yeah, there's been quite a bit of movement in the way that comments work in Excel, but it's kind of a bit under the radar. No one tends to really know about them because you have to be in the frame of mind of working collaboratively with things like comments in the Excel world, which, you know, most places that I've worked in the past, they're a bit behind on that. They basically use Excel to just drop information into it and then save copies of copies or send them around via email. Whereas Excel really now becomes very powerful from a collaboration piece of equipment, where you share it via Microsoft Teams, you put it into SharePoint, you add comments such as these, and basically, you know, everyone is working on one document together rather than multiple different documents or versions of the same document, and then try to bring it all together at the end. So yeah, this new style comments is not something that really I've seen a lot of, but it definitely has a real good use in the workplace, etc. Hopefully this helped answer your question. I know it's you asked how to place a comment on a cell, and you go to the review tab and add it, but it's probably worth just understanding that comments now have changed from what they were 5 years ago, where they now become conversations. Anyway, hopefully that helped out. Yeah, and if you found it useful, please drop a like on the video. Yeah, the little triangle in the corner of the cell there, it's it's pretty useful. And there used to be functions where, if I just come over to the desktop again, the show comments, it used to actually show the comments basically right next to the cell, which became a bit problematic, and you used to have to move them out of the way. But it's nice to see that Excel have actually now added a new basically pane on the right hand side here, which basically shows all of the comments together, and yeah, basically you can reply to all of the comments just here as needed. And they obviously have next, delete, and various other pieces of information there. But yeah, comments are very useful if you're sharing a document and basically you want to basically instruct people to fill out very specific information into a specific column. You used to see these headers with comments in, basically just kind of detailing out what is expected in that particular comment. Do you mean rename the sheets of the workbook? So instead of sheet 1, sheet 2, etc. Or do you mean the actual name of the workbook itself? Okay, so to rename the sheets of a workbook, it's pretty straightforward. If I just jump back to the desktop here, yeah, so these sheet names at the bottom, what you want to do is actually just, there's a couple of ways you can do this. Double click basically then highlights the text inside that particular sheet name, and you can just overwrite it. So I can just say Excel table. Right, so I can change the name of that particular sheet just by doing that. Or I can right click and then I can go to rename, and then you get the same thing. You can just rename the sheet that way as well. Yeah, it's as simple as that basically. Yeah, just double click it or right click and rename, and they both do the same thing. Okay, if no one has any other questions, I'm probably going to call that a day on this particular stream, but I might come back again in a few days for another Q&A. Hopefully you guys found this all useful, and if you did, drop a like on the video, and I will catch you guys